Hey everyone, I'm Jay Shear and welcome to this episode of Business Minds Coffee Chat. The goal of this show is to share insights, help to lift and inspire others, and deliver relevant, meaningful, and actionable content. It's been said that connecting with something greater than yourself is a way to live a more meaningful, happier, and healthier life. So, how do we find such meaning and purpose? According to Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, we can discover this meaning in life in three different ways. One, by creating a work or doing a deed. Two, by experiencing something or encountering someone. And three, by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. Well, our guest today discovered something that ignited meaning and purpose within him during a cultural exchange trip to Haiti while in college. He was so moved that within 2 years of that trip, he co-founded an organization to help impoverished communities obtain the resources they need to sustainably manage their own development. He's a results-oriented entrepreneurial international development professional with over a decade of hands-on management and community development experience. He holds a bachelor's degree in international relations from American University. He spent a year at Emerson College in Boston studying PR and marketing, and 2 years in Spain teaching for the Spanish government and acquiring a diploma in Hispanic language and culture studies from the University of Salamanca. In 2014, he was chosen as American University's School of International Studies Alumnus of the Year. He speaks regularly about empowerment and community-driven development and his work in Haiti. Please welcome the co-founder and executive director of Roots of Development, Chad Bissonnette. Chad, welcome.
Thank you, Jay, so much.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for you being here today. So let's dive right in. Take us back, if you will, to where you were raised and touch on any specific instances you can point to growing up that were early indicators of the path you would choose.
You know, I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, just outside of Storrs, which is where the University of Connecticut is based. Both my parents were educators, teachers, and they taught alternative programs within the public school system. They taught bilingual ed for a while, which is now or turned into ESL, English as a Second Language. They both did a large portion of their career teaching what back then was called SED, Socially Emotionally Disturbed program. And I would say there wasn't a lot early on that maybe allowed me to kind of predict what I would be doing now. But I think the way that my parents raised me, always kind of with a natural interest in things that were not me, right? Cultures, activities, languages, and of course, people. They planted that seed with me and really got me interested in that without maybe even recognizing my interest in that early on. So that later on, when I was old enough and opportunities started popping up that allowed me to actually independently travel or get involved or experience, have experiences that were outside of what I knew, outside of my reality, that exposed me to different cultures and different things like that. I took them. And that is what eventually, after many of those experiences, what eventually led me is one of those experiences was a trip to Haiti, to an island called La Gonave. And the timing was just, I think, was right without me knowing it at that time, where that was the particular one of those experiences that ended up turning into much more. But it probably, I really, even in college, I had no idea that I didn't really have the intent to start a nonprofit, manage a nonprofit, be doing development work in Haiti.
Hmm.
But I think it was actually the experiences of kind of looking outside of my circle of what I knew as my reality, culture, so forth, um, that caused me to be interested in exploring um, alternatives to that, and that's what eventually led me to Haiti and to co-founding Roots of Development.
So we're going to dig deeper into that here momentarily. I'm always fascinated, Chad, by those who not only talk about change and the desire to make a difference, but actually take action and do the work. And, you know, we're probably all familiar with the quote by Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. So talking about that trip and what resonated with you in Haiti, I would love for you to share. What was it that led you to want to be part of the change in Haiti?
So I think Haiti is a fascinating place. It has, I think, one of the most, I think, extraordinary and impactful and inspiring histories of most of the countries in the world. And for the sake of time, I won't get into all that. I encourage everybody to really look into that and find out what Haiti's history is. It was the second country to gain its independence after the United States in the entire Western Hemisphere. It's the only country in the history of the world where the slaves revolted successfully in order to create an independent nation that still exists today, which had repercussions across the globe and just really kind of is still, I think, resonates and is a powerful fact of history that plays into today. So that's one thing. And it happened to be Haiti where kind of, because I was traveling a lot, I was experiencing a lot of different cultures. Every opportunity I took. Haiti was just another one at first.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the timing and the intensity of Haiti and that history and the realities that I found there, which leads into kind of answering your question directly, which is two things. One is that it really did hit me as how could a country and this population, this community that I had met when I traveled down there, how could they be living in the conditions that they're living? How could they not have access to even some of the most simplest resources to us when the country is literally an hour and a half flight away, hour and a half hour flight away from the United States of America? Because you can travel a lot of places, but you take long, flights away, a lot of trains, planes, and automobiles, or you can see things on the news and they feel so distant from us. Haiti is so close. In fact, I live in Washington, D.C. now, and it's a longer flight to go from Washington, D.C. to Miami than it is to go from Miami to Port-au-Prince. And so how could, when the family that I was staying with on this first exchange trip, when they saw that I had a shirt I wanted to wear, it was a little wrinkled, they said, please, let me take it, let me iron it for you. And it was a metal shell of an iron that you put charcoals in to heat up to iron my shirt. Now, I grew up in Connecticut, close to the border of Massachusetts, where there's, I don't know if any of your listeners or you've heard of Sturbridge Village. It's one of those recreated colonial towns in the United States. I remember seeing those devices in that on middle school trips and high school trips. And here it was being used at that time, it was 2007, 2006, 2007. So that really blew me away. And then two, I would say, is that I grew up with tons of opportunities, resources, choices that consciously and unconsciously allowed me to develop into the individual I wanted to be. It gave me all of these to make mistakes along the way, but I still had choices and opportunities and resources. And that was fundamental to who I was and my happiness and allowing me to develop into the person that I want to develop into. And I'm thinking, I met folks down there that were just like that. that wanted to become a better individual, that wanted to better their community, that wanted to play a part in the world, to have an influence on others around them. The only difference between me and them is that I happened to be born, just happened to be born in a place that had all of those choices and opportunities and resources, and they did not. And it entered me, and I realized how frustrated I would be, how incredibly difficult that would be if I just happened to be the same person, but born in a different circumstance in a different place. And those two things, I think, really drove me to start kind of the slow steps, maybe not even knowing where it would lead, but slow steps to getting more actively involved and more formally part of helping this population, working in Haiti and helping these folks better themselves as individuals and better the communities, turn them into the communities that they wanted to see them be.
So Chad, what was one of the first steps then that you took? So now you've got that fire, right? You started to see where change could happen, and you obviously felt that you were someone who could help expedite that and put some plans into motion. So what did that look like, and what were the very first things that you did?
So I had studied enough at that point of development. I had traveled enough. I had witnessed and reflected and listened and learned enough to realize that a big mistake in development is when those that are not from the communities or countries or places where that development is happening, it should not be, if I'm saying this correctly, it should not be you who leads that process. It really needs to be the folks that the development is meant to serve that should be leading that effort for the sake of sustainability, for the sake of dignity and respect and everything good. They should be the ones leading it. That was clear enough to me in the beginning. And so one of the first things I did was I also didn't want to kind of go around leadership structures that already existed, because I knew that could lead to creating conflict. So I was introduced immediately, because of the nature of the trip, to the local leaders, right? Official and non-official, but people who really kind of played a role in their community. And so it was easy to recognize them. So I went through them and I said, listen, I've got an idea. It's not a long-term thing, because at this point I had no intention of nonprofit and the formal official thing and so forth and so on. It was just, I wanted to really kind of get a little bit more involved and give back a bit. So I said, I'd really like to round up some resources back where I come from, which has a lot of resources to share, and provide it to you all to do something that's a top priority for the community. Would you, but I also knew I didn't want to stick just to those leaders, because those leaders tend to be of a certain type of certain set of characteristics that don't always represent the community as a whole.
Okay.
And so when decisions like that are made, they can be skewed to whoever is in kind of leadership and not necessarily the community as a whole. So I asked them, would they help? Would they be up for, did they agree with, and would they help organize a larger community meeting to ask this question of, if I could support with one thing, what would it be? What's the priority for the majority of folks in the community? And they said, yeah. They heard me out. They wanted to know why I wanted to do this, and kind of, I think, build a little bit more trust. And then they said, yeah, we had a large community meeting. And in that community meeting, a lot of different things were discussed, because the community faces a lot of challenges. But in the end, the decision was made to address clean water. The community has one of the largest natural water springs in the area, and yet it was really not okay. It was water that should not be consumed by folks, had lots of bacteria and microbes and things like that in it, but yet they use it for everything, because there's no plumbing, there's no things like that. So I guess my first thing was to really kind of work through local leadership, right? Ask them, is there anything wrong with this idea of me getting involved and helping out? Mm-hmm. 2, would you help me reach a larger portion of the community to really make a decision that represents the community as a whole, that they, from the beginning in the decision-making process, they are leading that, the community as a whole. Second thing I did is I went back home, sat down, and I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter explaining my trip explaining what I had witnessed there. And this was actually on the second trip. It's for the sake of time. I don't know sometimes how to manage all these details, this long story, but I wrote a letter circumstances that they're living. This is what really hit me. We have the ability to share and literally have such a direct impact on these people and their ability to improve their community, improve their quality of life, so forth and so on. Will you give? And this was just me. I didn't have a nonprofit at this point. I didn't have a formal business entity, anything like that. But I knew it was a fine thing to ask everybody because it wasn't for me personally, it was for others. And so I was shameless in really asking and sending that letter to everybody I knew. I knew that plenty of people were going to say no. That would, no problem. But I knew people were going to say yes. And I knew I shouldn't be afraid, because I hear this a lot from people when it comes to kind of fundraising or asking for support for things. If it's not for you, sometimes you need it. So it's okay for you to ask for you too. But if it's not for you, ask. Expect no's, but from that, you'll get yeses. And so I sent it to everybody under the sun. And I got such an incredible response. Showed me how generous folks were and just how, and that kind of started the whole process, because it raised a lot more money than I thought I was going to. So much so that I got nervous about just kind of sending down all this money that was from friends and family that I felt responsible for. So I ended up, life was in a place, I was young enough and, things were flexible enough for me to straight up pack up and actually move down there, live down there and kind of see this project through. And it was just before I left that a friend of mine from college was watching this thing all play out very informally, who said, why don't you create a formal structure around it? Why don't you create a business entity, a nonprofit entity to support you on this? One, to make things more formal and official, and with money coming in now too, and also it's a stronger way to get more support, because then it becomes tax deductible for people and all those kind of technical things.
Sure. Yeah, makes perfect sense. So what was the gap in time between the first trip that you took when you were in college and then this second trip that you're talking about, where the wheels really started to move forward?
I think it was about 13, 14 months.
Okay.
I first went in 2005, had that great experience, left, didn't expect anything else. It was another incredible trip, experiencing a lot. Went back about a year later, so 2006, got this idea, had that community meeting with the leaders and people and folks from the community, then came back and did some, wrote the letter, started doing some fundraising. And then probably about a year, halfway through the year, I started raising funds, kept on raising funds, and then started putting it into my head, you know what? This could be really an incredible life experience, right? Something to learn from, something to be part of. And so then about a year after that second trip, 2007, September of 2007 is when I actually, at that point, had raised money and packed up and bought a ticket, one-way ticket, and actually flew down and to live down there for, I didn't know at the point, an indeterminate amount of time, which was quite overwhelming. It didn't really hit me until about a month before I was flying out. I had that ticket, that date, where I started saying, what have I got myself into? What is this? What am I? But it was something was pushing me to do it, saying to myself, this is an incredible opportunity. You're lucky for this to be an opportunity. Try it out.
Incredible. So you're there, you're working on this project, you get the community behind this project, and
they're leading it. I mean, don't have an official nonprofit at this point. It's just me. It took a couple months. I had to learn the language first while I was down there. All the other stuff before had been done through a translator. And so it was really them leading it. I mean, when I say them leading it, I mean, we started by having meetings, just sitting down saying, okay, so what does this water mean? Why did you all choose water? Why is it an issue? What are you looking for? What are your goals? What kind of skills? What have you tried before? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Have you seen other examples? What kind of technical skills, to help us with a project like this are available locally? What are not? And then started little by little doing the work. And it was, I mean, there were days where there's over 100 residents volunteering out in this whole area, breaking rocks, digging ditches, carrying rocks from one location to another. incredible community-led effort. And,
Wow.
that's when there's ownership. And so that's when there's sustainability.
Wow.
A lot of organizations come in and say, this community needs water. It's true. They may need a clean water system. Bring in all their technical help, bring in their resources, build it, and say, here you go. Here's better quality of life. Take off. It's yours to manage. But because that ownership was just not there, because the community didn't put blood, sweat, and tears into it, because they didn't make that decision, all sorts of things can just kind of creep in that year or two from that point, things aren't working, things aren't functioning, and it's just not, the investment was just not what it could have been.
That truly is incredible. So did they achieve the goals that they had set out for themselves?
Yeah, and more, actually.
And more.
Fascinating, because they captured the spring, the location where like the underground water just naturally exits and comes above ground. They captured that to protect the actual source more because it's when you don't have plumbing, an entire water source is where, folks come to collect water to bring back home, to wash, to clean the house, to drink, to cook. People go down there to shower and bathe. Folks bring their livestock to come down to drink. So there's a lot of activities. So it's easy for it to get dirty where the source is. So they captured that, laid piping down, carried a good portion of the water out to some tanks that again protected that water. And then in that tank, they could treat the water through various different treatment processes. It changed over time because there were times where the Haitian government, their kind of water department, got involved in offering sources that served over 10,000 people, different support, but could treat the water so that folks were then able to use the water that was not captured as for other activities and use the water that was captured for clean treated water that could be consumed, used in other ways.
Incredible.
And then went on further, because then there was times where at other moments there were other partners, or with our support in the future, we built off of that in order to, for example, build a clothes washing area further up and kind of a bathing area further up, recognizing that would improve the system even more in order to kind of keep activities separate, to keep it cleaner.
Thank you for sharing that story. I greatly appreciate it. So let's talk about Roots of Development. Now the nonprofit has been created. How does Roots differ from other charitable organizations, and why do those differences matter?
So I would say we differ greatly in our approach and philosophy, which I've referred to here. To be perfectly honest, I'm on the ground a lot. I have been for many, many years now. I interact with a lot of other nonprofits, both here in the States and outside. More and more organizations are starting to use the words of kind of community-led, sustainability, all that, but their actual way of functioning is not that. And that's a real problem, and it's a disconnect. And I think a lot of donors don't necessarily know that that's the case. Now, I think it's getting better and better. So we're on the journey, and that is improving. But for example, just to maybe to help folks wrap their head around a little bit, organizations will say, two things. We do community-led development, yet the organization is already kind of works in a particular industry or sector, right? Health or water or agriculture. You're already, to a certain degree, deciding for the partners you work with on the ground what the priority is going to be, or what they are going to do. That's one kind of example, right? A second one is community-led. Well, who is the community that's leading that? A lot of times organizations will at least be aware that it should be community-led, and so they'll work with the leaders that are in place in a community already. The problem with that is I've seen so many times where organizations will work with local leaders to make those decisions and start carrying out the project. The problem is that that leadership does not truly represent the community as a whole. So you don't have the community buy-in. So how do you actually do community-led, as opposed to maybe say, I don't know how you want to define it, but like locally led development? so that there's real buy-in from everybody. And you also don't kind of, what's the word, reinforce power dynamics that are not necessarily fair and equal to the whole, to the greater community. In some cases, a minority may be making decisions for a majority. So there's components and aspects, and when it comes down to actually implementing these projects as successfully and as sustainably as possible, a lot of organizations are not there yet. So that's one way. Two is, and the second one, I would say a lot of organizations are much are the same. Roots is the same as many other organizations. It's just not everybody's there yet. But I am the only member of our staff who is not Haitian. Everybody else is Haitian, and I actually removed myself over the years from the actual programmatic project on the ground, communicating and working with local leaders and our partners and communities. Removed myself from that because of I could play. It was stronger for the organization, better for the organization, for me to play a different role, which was really kind of less interaction, because I'm not from that culture. Even though I've spent a lot of time there, I speak the language. My wife is Haitian. I am pretty deep in there, but I'm still not. And so the nuances and the differences, and kind of even just visually, right? Visually sometimes, of kind of what comes with somebody seeing a different person in a different way, and the expectations and the assumptions and the all sorts of things. So pulled myself back from that, really focused more on kind of communications, fundraising, partnership development. I obviously work with the team and strategize too, and share thoughts and share opinions and all that, but implementing, all the programs and the projects, and they're all Haitian, which I think is a strong aspect of the organization.
So always focused on the greater good.
And I'm telling you, I certainly did not create the organization in the end to be a fundraiser or to be a communications person or whatever. I started it because you're passionate about the work that the organization is doing. But I think if you, if you're a good manager, you reflect on those things a lot, and you start realizing, and it may mean that you do stay in that type of position, but you need to be open to being aware of when does it not, or not even maybe just that, but also skills wise, right? I mean, do you have the skills to play this particular role if you founded it for good? Or would you be better used and more effective for the organization in this role? And who would be best to fit into the other roles because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, that's an important lesson that anyone can benefit from, no matter what the business is. So what are you doing differently today in light of COVID-19 and what's happening in the world? And what advice do you have for other nonprofits?
So obviously there's the kind of, again, there's the programmatic, I guess a programmatic way I could respond to that question. How do our projects differ? How does, the organization, in order to implement projects right now during COVID, what is different and how have we changed? And then also institutionally, right? Organizationally, how have we been impacted by COVID ourselves, and how do we adapt to that? For the sake of time, would you prefer me answering one? Are you more interested in one of those than the other?
Yeah, so let's look at specifically how you're adapting. So let's talk about communication. Let's talk about our programs continuing to move forward, and how have you adapted, and are you pivoting at all and doing things differently?
So nonprofits. I forget. I saw the statistic not too long ago, but it's something like the average nonprofit has enough savings for it to keep functioning for, I think, a month or a month and a half. That's not recommended. That's on average. That's what the average nonprofit has. That is very vulnerable. And so we quickly realized, all of a sudden, mid-March, I was actually up in Connecticut. I was speaking to a high school. And then the next day I had a fundraiser. Folks were throwing at a house in Boston for us. And that's when things really kind of blew up here in the States, right? I came home, and almost immediately all in-person meetings and kind of presentations were canceled. We had a fundraiser scheduled for, I think, 2 weeks from then at the Embassy of Haiti. That was, we plan our budgets out around these activities, right? I mean, fundraisers are not just, to raise funds when you can, how you can. I mean, you really try to plan these things out so that you can be as strong and, solid of an organization with a good plan and least amount of vulnerability as possible. That was immediately canceled. And then we started realizing pretty quickly that our big annual gala, which brings in a large portion of our budget every year, was very likely going to be postponed, if not just unrealistic. 300, 350 people getting together in a room. When is the next time that's going to be realistic? Even if it's allowed, are folks going to want to put themselves in a position where they're in a room with 300 to 350 people? So we quickly realized we were in a rough place. And so some things that we adjusted is we obviously, we looked at our budget. We immediately started figuring out where we can cut on expenses. We had to, this wasn't immediate, but we eventually had to we did various different budgets for whether we held the annual event at a later date with projecting less income because less folks may want to attend. Companies would be less likely to be corporate sponsors because they're all struggling financially, cutting salaries, laying people off. Are they going to be able to be giving in the same way? Or would we be better off we did an alternative budget without the event at all, so that you save on all the expenses that you have to throw an event and still try to find maybe an alternative way to bring in some money around that. And we actually realized that we probably would be, financially, it made more sense. It was more strategic to actually not do the event based on the unknowns of what that could look like and the real chance that the income would be much less. We also had to figure out at the same time financially how to deal with the staff in Haiti could no longer travel around the country the same way that they always did to implement projects, to get resources and materials from the capital out to the island, all these sorts of things. So what do we need to do? And that entailed bringing on some extra support that were already in the areas where we do our work, that had the capacity that could support us organizationally to keep activities going and to respond to COVID, the threat of COVID in Haiti, which is just hitting now. So we had to figure out, well, how do we fundraise? How do we cut expenses, but yet raise money when less people have money to give, or that was that some folks do, how do you find who does, who doesn't, who has the ability? How do you also communicate? How do you project that you still need help when you know that people are not in the position they were a month ago, right? Themselves, financially, when you have unemployment numbers now in, millions, tens of millions or something like that. So these took a lot of adjustments, but one thing I can say is that for now, besides what I've shared, a lot of people amazed me and just were so generous, and folks who weren't directly impacted by this situation, who kept their jobs, who kept their salaries, in fact, some people were telling me they were having less expenses themselves because they were unable to go out and eat. They were really not doing as much shopping. We had people sending, instead they could no longer get haircuts. So every month when they would be getting a haircut, they were sending us that money as a donation instead. Oh. So, I mean, people really, it was so humbling. It was quite emotional to kind of just see everything going on, everything that people were facing, and yet what they were doing for us. So we're still in the middle of it, but we stabilized because of people's response. Now we're focused heavily on COVID activities where we work in order to try to hold off COVID getting to the island until last night. Literally, we got the first 3 official cases confirmed by the Ministry of Health. So now we're really on preventing the spread and kind of trying to inject partnerships and support to the one hospital that the island has. The island's population, because I work on an island off of mainland Haiti, the island's population is about 100,000 people, which is pretty sizable. Okay. And there's one hospital, and up until right now, they have a space for COVID treatment, but they don't have beds yet. I think they may have 4 beds at this point, but they're trying to get, I think, 40. We just got a machine from the Ministry of Health in the hospital to test folks, but it's not yet installed. They're waiting for the technician. But, I mean, it's progress, but it's in the meantime, what can you do and how can you do it best and most quickly?
Speaking of support, before I ask my last question, where can we go to engage with you to learn more about Roots of Development, to get involved in the organization, and to donate if that resonates with the viewers?
Sure. Yeah. The best place to donate is on our website. And I say that because it's also the easiest thing to share, right? The name of the organization is Roots of Development. So the website is rootsofdevelopment.org. We have specific pages that we are using, fundraising pages, GoFundMe and Razoo, which is now, I think, called Mighty Cause. 2 of those kind of crowd-sourced funding, fundraising platforms, where we are raising money specifically to stabilize the organization a bit under the circumstances and to raise funds for COVID. But whether a donation is made through the website or on those platforms, all of our money right now that things have stabilized and everything, and we're focused on COVID, is going to COVID, regardless of where it comes in. But those are 2 areas. The best place to stay up to date on our almost daily activities, what's going on, what our needs are, and therefore kind of get ideas of how and where you can get involved too, is through social media. That is obviously the nature of social media. That's where we update things much more regularly. We announced last night that there was the first 3 official cases, what our steps have been, what our next steps are, all that. We also post on alternative approach to development, right? On development without dependency, on better developments, more sustainable community-led development. So there are those learning tools as well that we share there. So that's Facebook and Instagram primarily.
Okay.
And all you have to do for those is just search the organization's name, Roots of Development. And then on all of those platforms is my contact information, and depending on what the interests are or the capabilities of giving, material resources, financial resources, then I can kind of direct you to whether that be continuing to talk to me and planning stuff out, or putting in direct contact with a member of the team down in Haiti, depending on what the situation is.
Okay, perfect. Well, we will link to the Facebook page. We'll do the same thing on Instagram. Obviously, we'll have your website as well. So if anyone is interested in learning more, they will have the ability to find you as easily as possible. So here is my final question to you. What is one of the most valuable lessons, Chad, that you've learned from your work with the Haitian people that's had the greatest impact on you personally?
So many, so I'm trying to figure out maybe the most. I think, besides obviously just through this work, the reiteration of how important it is to not be the leader, right, of this work that is not meant to serve you. I would say more so is that we just have to understand and accept. And because I say this because it not only impacted me when it comes to the work and Roots of Development and all that, but I use it every day as a reminder and a learning tool, and I think others can, is that it's naturally hard for most of us to understand the reality of another that's different than ourselves. It is very important that we try, and we should try all the time. We should be open to it. We should put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. We should, read what we can, talk to others as often as we can, and just realize that it's hard to understand all of the components. And so we quickly can come to assumptions and judgments and decisions and expectations that fit our reality and our truths and our experiences, but not necessarily of another group. And that realization helps me be more effective as a, as the director of the organization, more effective in other ways in my life, a better person, and happier, to be perfectly honest, at the end of the day, because so much improves when you do that. And that got me through to where I was making decisions to how my role and my position and what I was involved in had to change for the organization in order for it to be more effective and to just have better results and be better for everybody involved. And I think it also is relevant, on a personal way as well.
Beautifully said, Chad. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing those words of wisdom, and certainly something we can all learn from and is as applicable today as ever. So with that said, I wanted to thank you so much, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you so very much for sharing your story with us, for sharing information about Roots of Development, and for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for the platform, to be able to share these thoughts and to continue pushing for for a world that works with each other more often, more effectively, and in order to improve quality of life for everybody involved.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you all for watching today. And if you found value in this episode, you know what to do. Go ahead and like and share with your friends. And until next time, stay healthy and optimistic. Keep learning and growing. And remember that transformative change in your life and business begins with you, and absolutely nothing happens until you take action. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Business Minds Coffee Chat.